In the outskirts of a serene and peaceful small town, two children are learning the art of swordplay. Our protagonist, Lyth, struggles with the practice, often getting outmaneuvered by his friend Sarah. Despite their young age, Sarah already exhibits remarkable sword-fighting skills. As they spar, Lyth tries to remind Sarah that their session is meant to be a friendly match. However, Sarah urges him to take it seriously and give his best effort. She explains that they can only become holy knights by training as hard as possible. To be chosen for such a prestigious role, one must be among the strongest knights in the world. Seeing that Lyth is not faring well, Sarah decides to give him a break. They sit down for lunch, busy devouring their sandwiches, reflecting on their practice and dreaming of their future as knights. Sarah insists that the only way to become stronger is by practicing as hard as possible, emphasizing that in their world, strength is everything. She tries to inspire Lyth, our protagonist, who is lost in thoughts about how he ended up friends with this wild girl. As far back as he can remember, Sarah has been a constant presence in his life, around since he first started crawling. She has always been kind to him, going out of her way to take care of him. To Lyth, she's more like a sister than a friend, and they even bicker like siblings. Sarah has always dreamed of becoming a holy knight, and since Lyth is her best friend, she decided to train him too, hoping he could join her one day. Despite not being thrilled about spending his youth training intensely, Lyth enjoys Sarah's company. That's why he always brings her food during their sparring sessions. As Lyth reminisces about their past, Sarah quickly finishes her meal and gets ready to train again. She asks him if he knows about the people living in the 4th Division, mentioning that they have no names and lead very difficult lives. Sarah talks about the people in the 4th Division, explaining how they struggle to survive under terrible conditions, even struggling to feed their children. This harsh reality makes Lyth acutely aware of the world's injustices, yet he holds on to hope. In their world, once you turn 18, the gods assign you to different classes. These classes range from being a master swordsman to working as a farmer. While there are no laws forcing you to live according to your assigned class, Lyth knows some jobs are restricted to specific classes. For example, farmers or merchants cannot become adventurers because that role is reserved for the warrior class. Lyth reflects on this rigid system, realizing how difficult it is to break free and pursue what you truly want. His thoughts are interrupted when Sarah swings her sword at him, snapping him back to reality. She reassures him not to worry about the future, promising that if he keeps training, he will become a strong-class warrior. Years pass and the children grow up, ready to discover their assigned classes. This anticipation leads them to the capital of the empire, where they attend the grand assignment ceremony. They knew the annual ceremony drew large crowds, but they were still astonished by the bustling streets. The entire city felt like a grand summer festival, with everyone excited about the future ahead. Sarah was the most enthusiastic of all, her playful attitude making Lyth laugh as they navigated the crowded streets. Some people recognized Lyth as the son of the popular Duke Wesley. Although Lyth wasn't fond of the attention, he politely greeted everyone with a smile as they made their way to the main fortress where the ceremony would be held. Upon entering the majestic building, they were awestruck by its grandeur and the number of people waiting for their class assignments. Those already assigned wore their emotions on their faces. Those given combat-oriented roles looked thrilled, while others with more ordinary classes appeared somewhat disappointed, even though no class was inherently bad. As Lyth scanned the room, he overheard someone mention his father, Duke Rye Wesley, who had also come to attend the ceremony. The Duke was a powerful holy knight assigned to protect the land, effectively ruling it. Though beloved by the citizens, he rarely paid attention to his own son, who tried to avoid his father's gaze. The Duke was not alone. A young man followed him, whom Sarah pointed out. Lyth explained that the intimidating figure was actually his half-brother, a fact that brought a look of sadness and disappointment to Lyth's face. He shared with Sarah that his brother came from the 4th Division, which was why their father never acknowledged him. This kind of neglect was typical of the aristocracy in their society, a sad yet accepted norm. As they discussed this, a priest called Lyth to approach the altar, signaling the moment he had been anxiously waiting for. Following the priest's instructions, The young man placed his hands on the strange crystal to begin the class assignment process. It didn't take long before a symbol appeared, causing a huge commotion inside the fortress. Everyone recognized the symbol. It marked him as a holy knight, one of the rarest and most revered warriors. It was common knowledge that only 1 in 10,000 citizens became a holy knight, earning them immense respect and admiration. As the crowd celebrated, the young man's father, Duke Wesley, quietly approached and proudly announced that this newly chosen holy knight was his son. This declaration shocked the young knight, who couldn't recall the last time his father acknowledged him. It was clear to him that Rai was only recognizing him now because of his prestigious new class, intending to use him to bolster his own authority. Initially, the young knight considered exposing his father's neglect, but he decided to play along with Rai's plans, harboring his own schemes. After his assessment, the priest called Sarah to the altar. Nervous, she placed her hands on the crystal. To her delight, she too was assigned to the Holy Knight class. The rarity of 2 holy knights being chosen on the same day was astonishing, but Sarah was simply overjoyed that her hard work had paid off. She rushed to Lyth, telling him she would wait for him to join her among the kingdom's elite warriors. Lyth gave her a nervous smile and approached the priest. As he walked slowly to the altar, he could feel his father's intense gaze, a silent demand not to disappoint the family. The pressure on Lyth's shoulders was immense. He knew the odds of becoming a holy knight were slim, especially since 2 had already been chosen that day. Yet, he refused to give up. With a determined step, he reached the altar and placed his hands on the crystal. Everyone in the citadel eagerly awaited Lyth's result. Rai had already begun planning how to use his son's newfound status to solidify his dominance. However, after several minutes, no symbol appeared. This unprecedented event left everyone in shock. The priest explained that the crystal's silence meant Lyth was considered unemployed by the gods. That night, Lyth sat alone in his room at the Wesley residence when his father summoned him. Expecting harsh words rather than emotional support, he was unprepared for the cruelty that followed. Without hesitation, the Duke declared that Lyth was no longer part of the family, stating that he didn't see Lyth as his son anymore. He gave Lyth just 1 hour to gather his belongings and leave the mansion, effectively disowning him. That night, as Lyth left the city, contemplating what kind of job he would take on, Sarah was busy celebrating with her family and friends. Her father praised her for working so hard and achieving the seemingly impossible by becoming a holy knight. This had been her lifelong dream, and she couldn't help but feel overjoyed. However, she couldn't fully enjoy the moment knowing that her best friend was going through such a difficult time. She knew Lyth's struggles better than anyone else. Her thoughts were interrupted when one of her friends mentioned seeing Lyth leave the city earlier that evening. This news was too much for Sarah. She couldn't let her best friend leave without a proper goodbye. She told everyone to keep celebrating as she dashed out of the pub, running through the city streets in search of Lyth, determined to find him before he disappeared from her life. Sarah frantically asked people in the streets if they had seen the Duke's son, but no one was able to help her. Unbeknownst to her, she had almost found Lyth in one of the alleys, but missed him entirely. While she was desperately searching for him, Lyth was focused on leaving the city that reminded him of all the recent disappointments he faced. The next morning, Lyth decided to join a group of mercenaries as a helper to earn some money. Lacking any useful skills, his main job was to carry their equipment as they traveled from place to place completing their tasks. Despite not having a significant role, he was glad to be around people who didn't care about his class or his past. They treated him kindly, often making jokes to keep his spirits up and ensure he didn't feel completely alone. Even though Lyth had found some semblance of belonging, it was understandable why he still felt a deep sense of loss and confusion. Feeling like a nobody, Lyth had trained himself to fight the strongest enemies, only to end up as a mere servant. He spent the next few days in relative peace, traveling through the countryside with the mercenaries. However, this peace was short-lived. One afternoon, they were escorting an old merchant and his young daughter when a group of bandits ambushed them in the middle of the forest. The bandits were strong, and it didn't take long for them to overpower Lyth's companions. Lyth watched in horror as the bandits decided to eliminate all witnesses before escaping with their newly acquired loot. Facing certain death, Lyth decided to use all this training for one final stand against the bandits. He knew he had little chance of defeating so many skilled fighters, but he preferred to die fighting with his head held high rather than being slaughtered like an animal. Grabbing a sword, he charged at the bandit leader. He was quick and knew how to handle a sword, but he soon realized that these bandits were far from weak. The bandit leader easily deflected his attacks and threw him to the ground. As Lyth lay there, the leader asked why he even bothered to try. As all this chaos unfolded, the young girl remembered what her father had told her about the different classes. The old merchant had explained that once people turned 18, they were assigned roles such as warriors, like the mercenaries, or merchants, like himself. Many were also classified as farmers, responsible for cultivating the land. It was usually wise to stick to the type of work that matched your class. Recalling this, the girl looked at our protagonist, Lyth, who appeared bruised and battered. She wondered if he might be a sword master. However, Lyth was not fortunate enough to belong to a useful class and lacked the skills needed to battle his enemies effectively. Despite this, he possessed physical drive, enabling him to cut through almost anything with his sword. Lyth faced the bandit leader, knowing he had little chance but determined to fight with every ounce of strength he had. The young girl watched, hoping that Lyth's spirit would somehow turn the tide in their favor. Our protagonist quickly began to realize the vast difference in power as his sword started to crack under the pressure. He knew he wouldn't last much longer if he continued fighting the seasoned bandit. Desperately, he tried to come up with a plan that could save not only his life, but also the lives of the merchant and his daughter. But before he could think for long, the bandit leader sent him flying through the air with a single powerful kick. By this point, even the bandit realized that Lyth had no useful skills, so he decided to stop toying with him and ordered his men to finish off all the witnesses. In that desperate moment, Lyth silently questioned the gods, asking why they made him so weak that he couldn't even save a single life by defeating these evil men. He knew his death was inevitable, but as a last-ditch effort, he reached for his dagger. The bandit leader, unimpressed by Lyth's defiance, decided it was time to end the fight. But just as he was about to strike, our protagonist heard a strange voice in his head. The voice told him that he had acquired two new skills. One was the physical boost that the bandit leader had used, and the other was blade enhancement, which made his weapon incredibly powerful. Lyth was familiar with these skills and knew that using them could change the tide of the battle. Without hesitation, he not only blocked the attack coming his way, but also launched a fierce counterattack against the bandits. They didn't even have time to comprehend what was happening before Lyth, now empowered by his newfound abilities, began taking them down one by one. It wasn't long before he was the last one standing. The merchant and his daughter watched in awe as our protagonist defeated the last bandit, their eyes wide with amazement at the sudden and overwhelming display of power. The little girl ran to him, wrapping her arms around him tightly before finally breaking down in tears. She started to express just how terrified she had been, and our young hero understood her fear all too well. This child had just gone through a near-death experience. As he tried to comfort her, the merchant spoke up, thanking him, acknowledging that they were alive solely because of him. This realization hit hard. Our protagonist had never truly saved anyone's life before. Still trying to process everything that had just happened, he was caught off guard when the old man asked if he was part of a warrior class. It was a fair assumption. Only someone assigned to a combat-oriented class could display such remarkable swordsmanship in a life-or-death situation. It was easy to see why the merchant was shocked to learn that, officially, Lyth didn't even have a job. Lyth still remembered the mysterious voice in his head, and as far as he knew, his desperate prayers had been answered by the gods, who granted him these special skills just to survive that dire moment. No matter how he acquired them, he was simply grateful that he was strong enough to save these innocent people who didn't deserve to die at the hands of petty criminals. As he pondered all of this, the old merchant spoke up again, saying he wanted to reward Lyth in some way for saving him and his daughter. Being a businessman, he could certainly offer our young hero some much-needed money, but Lyth wasn't really looking for any financial reward. However, he knew the merchant could assist him in another way, so he asked the old man to write a letter for him. The next day, Lyth returned to the capital, determined to meet with the high priest Augustine inside the citadel. His goal was to request a re-evaluation of his innate abilities. However, the old priest dismissed the idea, considering it a waste of time, and instructed his servant to send Lyth away. But that decision shifted when the servant handed over a letter Lyth had brought with him. The letter was written by a merchant who, as it turned out, was well acquainted with Augustine. The priest couldn't simply ignore the request from such a trusted friend. Moreover, the letter hinted that Lyth had somehow acquired skills that didn't align with his official assessment. Intrigued by this unusual situation, Augustine decided to meet with our protagonist to hear his story in detail. Lyth was still in disbelief that the seemingly ordinary merchant was actually connected with influential people like the high priest. Nonetheless, he was relieved that, thanks to this connection, he'd have been granted another chance to uncover the truth about his abilities. Augustine thanked him for saving his friend's life and agreed to re-evaluate his skills, though he cautioned that the outcome might remain the same. The priest ordered his servant to bring out the crystal and instructed Lyth to place his hand on it to begin the assessment. Lyth was filled with hope that his status as an unemployed outcast might change this time. But to his great disappointment, the crystal remained unresponsive, showing no symbols, indicating that he still didn't belong to any conventional class. However, as Lyth cursed his luck, Augustine noticed something remarkable. Despite the crystal's lack of a symbol, it did reveal that Lyth had gained 2 new skills. What was even more significant was that these skills were typically exclusive to those within a warrior class, making it impossible for Lyth, officially jobless, to possess them. Augustine explained to Lyth that acquiring skills isn't something that just happens out of the blue, and it's certainly not something that can be transferred from one person to another. He was baffled by how our protagonist had gained these abilities while still not being a part of any class. If he hadn't witnessed it himself, Augustine would never have believed such a thing was possible, but the evidence was undeniable. Determined to unravel this mystery, he decided to delve deeper into the strange circumstances surrounding Lyth's newfound powers. The old priest decided to consult some of the more obscure texts in his archives, and he invited Lyth to accompany him. As they entered the vast library, Lyth was awestruck by the sheer number of ancient, priceless books collected in one place. Augustine, however, was focused on a single goal. He began poring over book after book, searching for clues on how someone could gain new skills without being assigned to a specific class. Though his memory wasn't as sharp as it once was, Augustine vaguely recalled hearing about someone in the distant past who had also been unassigned to any class. He continued to search, flipping through dusty pages until finally, after what seemed like an endless search, he found exactly what he was looking for. Augustine shared with Lyth that, according to ancient records, there was once someone who, like him, wasn't part of any class but possessed extraordinary skills. This individual had the ability to mimic the abilities of their opponents, a power that seemed remarkably similar to what Lyth might have. However, there was one crucial detail that wasn't mentioned in the old text, but that Lyth had figured out. He revealed to the old priest that he only gained this ability after landing a few blows on the bandit leader. This suggested that Lyth might be able to replicate someone's skills simply by striking them. If true, this was an incredibly powerful, almost overpowered ability, but neither of them fully understood its potential yet. Realizing how significant this discovery could be, Augustine urged Lyth to venture out into the world and explore the full extent of his newfound power. Following this insightful conversation with the Archbishop, Lyth felt much better than he had just a few days earlier. He had uncovered something valuable about himself, and the thought that he still had the chance to achieve something extraordinary in his life filled him with hope. With renewed determination, he decided to harness this mysterious and powerful ability to pursue his dream of becoming a knight. However, becoming a knight isn't as simple as picking up a sword and donning a shiny suit of armor. It turns out you need to pass an exam to earn that title, which is why most people in the knight class train relentlessly. Determined to pursue his goal, Lyth went to the local office and signed up for the exam, which was scheduled to take place in a few days. With his name now officially in the recruitment process, Lyth decided to explore the capital's streets and see for himself why everyone spoke so highly of this place. He sampled various street foods, wandered through different shops, and was utterly amazed by the city's beauty. The streets were bustling with life, people shopping, children playing, and laughter filling the air. He also noticed many soldiers and mages strolling around, likely there to take the exam as well. Seeing them inspired Lyth even more. He dreamed of one day standing among these powerful warriors. With that in mind, he knew he had to start training immediately, as there wasn't much time left before the exam. But before he could even find a hotel, a familiar voice called out to him. Lyth quickly turned to see Sarah, out of breath yet visibly relieved to have found him again. However, there was also a fiery, almost dangerous look in her eyes, and for a moment he feared she might tear into him without mercy. To his surprise, though, she ran up to him and hugged him tightly, expressing how happy she was to see him again. Seeing the tears in her eyes, guilt washed over Lyth. It was clear that leaving without saying anything had been a terrible mistake. But before he could even begin to apologize for being so thoughtless, Sarah suggested they get off the streets before people started spreading awkward rumors about them. Understanding her point, they both headed to a nearby forest where Lyth repeatedly apologized for making her worry. He explained how his father had kicked him out, forcing him to take on work as a porter to survive. Then, with growing enthusiasm, he recounted how he had fought off the bandits and through that ordeal, gained new abilities. Upon hearing about Lyth's new abilities, Sarah's excitement was palpable. She eagerly suggested that he could now join her in all the battles they would undoubtedly face in the future. She urged him to demonstrate his newly acquired skills by slicing through a massive boulder. Lyth hesitated, unsure of how well his abilities would work in practice, but he was willing to give it a try. Gripping his short sword, he activated both the physical and blade enhancement skills before leaping into the air and striking the boulder with all his might. To his own amazement, he carved a deep ridge straight through the rock. Sarah was equally impressed by the display, remarking that if he could harness these skills to their fullest, he would surely pass the knight's exam with flying colors. This encouragement gave Lyth a significant boost in confidence, and he began to look forward to the upcoming test with renewed enthusiasm. Just before they headed back to the city, Sarah suggested that she could show him what a holy knight's abilities truly looked like. Intrigued, Lyth eagerly agreed, wanting to witness these special skills firsthand. Sarah then unleashed a powerful strike on the massive boulder, obliterating it completely with a single blow. The force was so intense that no trace of the rock remained, leaving Lyth in awe of her incredible power. He realized that even with his newfound abilities, he was no match for her strength. But deep down, he felt a strong determination to work hard and reach her level one day. To his surprise, Sarah offered to share her skill with him. She extended her fist, suggesting a fist bump, knowing that Lyth's unique ability allowed him to acquire new skills through physical contact with an opponent. Lyth wasn't sure if he could truly gain such immense power without intense training, but the temptation to acquire new skills was too strong to resist. So, he bumped fists with Sarah, and immediately his ability activated. A voice in his mind informed him that he had gained 2 new skills. One was called Celestial Boost, clearly a physical enhancement ability. The other was Celestial Blade, a skill whose purpose he couldn't quite grasp yet. However, he felt confident that these new abilities had elevated him to a whole new level. He thanked Sarah for sharing her power with him, but couldn't help but ask if she was really okay with giving away such strength. Sarah reminded him that having the best abilities doesn't make you strong on its own. It takes hard work and dedication to truly master them. Until Lyth put in the effort to train and hone these skills, she would always be ahead, no matter how many abilities he acquired. But with these new powers, Lyth felt certain that he would pass the knight's exam and soon join her as the newest member of the Imperial Order of Knights.